call the truth.
We're gonna move through this together. You
The
just
left
heard
is
a
fucking
lot.
dysfunctional, that's why we got Trump. Get your fucking act together, the left. Fucking idiots.
All right, we are here because we are determined. You heard a lot just now, but I want to say two things. I want to highlight two things, and then we're going to bring up our next speaker. Stick with this program. You just heard a lot of things, including a lot of things that have been going on, a lot of what gave rise to the situation and the extreme dangers of Trump and DeVos and Pence. This is a qualitative leap. This is fascism, and people do have a lot of making up to do. And one thing to take from what a number of people have been saying, but also what we just heard, is there is no Democrat going to save us. There's nobody out there who's going to save us but us, the masses of people. Right. Regular people. Regular people. Not waiting 4 years, not making a plan for the midterms, acting now decisively, relying on ourselves, looking out to the millions who've been trained that it's not their place to take history into their own hands. It is our place. It is our duty right now. So to take us further on this journey tonight, I want to bring up somebody very special. He's somebody who joined with me just over a week ago in initiating this effort, and we are just getting started, and you need to be part of this. You need to be an active part of this. Learning, contributing, and struggling with everybody you know, and acting in ways you've never acted before. This man got his start in political life when he was drafted to fight in that genocidal war in Vietnam, and he said hell no. He refused to fight. Even though it put him in military prison for 2 years, 1 year of which was solitary, he came out unrepentant. He became a revolutionary, a member of the movement for black liberation, and then a founding member of the Revolutionary Communist Party USA. He's a long-distance freedom fighter. He is a co-founder, together with Cornel West, of the Stop Mass Incarceration Network. He is somebody who has been on the front lines from Ferguson to Baltimore to Standing Rock to Baton Rouge. Everywhere people are standing up and fighting back, and everywhere that the masses of people are being gunned down by police, black and Latino people, and many other injustices, you can find Carl Dix. We are very honored to have him with us here tonight.
Face what we're actually up against. There's a grave danger looming over humanity. Just little more than a month from tonight, a fascist regime, the Trump-Pence regime, is slated to take the reins of power in society, in this, the most powerful country in the world. This will have dire consequences for humanity, if it is allowed to happen. It isn't just that Trump campaigned on a program that included a lot of horrendous things. I mean, he promised to bar Muslims from entering the country, to surveil and deport them. He promised to build a wall on the border with Mexico and to deport millions of immigrant workers. As he campaigned, he told lie after lie after lie, and he threatened those who opposed to expose his lies. He whipped up a lynch mob atmosphere at his rallies, targeting minorities, dissenters, or people in the press. And it isn't just that he's assembling a team of ghouls to carry out this program: open white supremacists, religious fanatics, militarists, and the like. It's all of this taken together. This is a fascist regime. Now, the website revcom.us has described fascism as follows: the exercise of blatant dictatorship by the bourgeois capitalist imperialist class, ruling through reliance on open terror and violence, trampling on what are supposed to be civil and legal rights, wielding the power of the state, and mobilizing organized groups of fanatical thugs to commit atrocities against masses of people, particularly groups of people identified as enemies, undesirables, or dangers to society. This is what the Trump-Pence regime will mean to the country and to the world. We must not let this go down. We must act now to stop this regime before it gets started. And look, I know that this system, this capitalist imperialist system, already inflicts unspeakable horrors on people in this country and around the world. I know that it's devastating the environment of the very planet that we live on. And people here have been fighting that for years. I know that the U.S. wages wars for empire in the Middle East that have caused the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people and driven countless millions into exile. People like Jeremy have done tremendous exposure of that. I know that in this country, women are treated like sex objects in punching bags. I know that their right to choose to have an abortion is under attack. Many people in this room, including Fran and others, have been in this battle to fight to stop those attacks. I know that black people face savage oppression, mass incarceration, police terror, an education system that's geared to fail our youth, and more. And I stood shoulder to shoulder with a lot of you in the fight to stop that. I also know that record numbers of undocumented immigrants have been rounded up and deported under the so-called immigration President Obama. And some people here in this room have been fighting that over the past 8 years and more too. But if this Trump-Pence regime is allowed to take power, all of these horrors will be greatly intensified. It'll be like they got put on steroids. And this regime will move to violently repress, if necessary, or intimidate any and all who dissent against it, who promote critical thinking of reality. And they'll move to cut off all possibility of resisting all these horrors. We've seen this happen before in Nazi Germany in the 1930s, in Chile and other countries in the 1970s. The whole society is drastically and dramatically changed. And the horrors that go down darken the sky, as one historian put it. And it does so for a long time. If you want to understand this, here's another way to look at it. Let's look at what happened after the end of the Civil War here in this country. Now, slavery was abolished. Black people got the right to vote. Some black people got elected to positions in the government. And an education system was set up that gave black people access to education for the first time. This was a tremendous change, but it was also a tremendous shock, especially to white people in the South. And some of the people who voted for Trump ain't got over that shock yet. Some of them still think the Civil War got decided wrong and they wish the other side had won. What followed was a period called Reconstruction. It wasn't paradise, but black people were able to raise their heads and to make some gains. They had to do this against continued terror and resistance from white supremacists, but at least black people could contest this and fight. But then in 1876, after a disputed presidential election, Reconstruction was overthrown. The defeated forces of the Confederacy were allowed to take power back, and they used that power to change everything. They snatched back just about every right that black people had won, and they murdered thousands of black people in the process. And then they killed thousands more over the following decades with lynch mobs and other kinds of terror. They created a situation where every black person knew that at any time they could be killed by whites for any reason or no reason at all. This had dire consequences for black people for decades to come after that. See, and here I have to say that if you're one of these people who, like some of these misguided comedians who said, well, black people have survived worse than Trump, we'll get through this too, I got two things I want to ask you. One, why would you want to go through some shit like that again? That's one. And two, why wouldn't you want to stand up and join with others to act to stop it in the interest of all of humanity? So that's why I'm here tonight, and that's why we're all here, to stop a fascist regime from taking the reins of power in society. And the unity that we need to do this has to encompass tens of millions of people who see the importance of doing this. Now, a lot of y'all know me. I'm still the same guy. I'm a revolutionary communist. I'm a follower of Bob Avakian. I've spent my life fighting to make revolution and bring into being a radically different world. And I know that this is still what humanity needs to end the horrors of this system once and for all, and that making this revolution is possible. And right now, coming from that viewpoint, I see the need, the burning need, to throw in with everybody else to accomplish a goal that is far short of revolution. And that goal is stopping the Trump-Pence regime before it gets started. See, and I see the need to do that because humanity needs to stop this regime to be able to fight for any kind of larger goal. So that's what we need to do. Now, how do we do it? To get into that, I want to read a paragraph from the plan issued by refusefascism.org. Imagine if people in the tens of millions filled the streets, powerfully declaring that this regime is illegitimate and demanding that it not be allowed to rule. The whole political landscape would be dramatically transformed. Every faction within the established power structure would be forced to respond. And all this could well lead to a situation in which this fascist regime is actually prevented from ruling. This is not some idle dream, but something which could be made a reality if all those who hate what is represented by this regime translate their outrage into firm determination and massive mobilization to create the conditions which make this possible. So that's what we need to do, and it begins right here tonight. Everybody in this room and everybody watching on the live stream has got to get involved in making this happen, starting now. We've got to get organized into this, and then we, all of us, have to go out and organize others into it, unleashing them to go out and organizing others still into it. And we've only got a month to do this, so we can't lose any time in making this happen. We've got to reach out in every way that we can to let others know that we need to mobilize millions to stop this fascist regime. You got to talk about this at your workplaces. You got to talk about this in your places of worship. You got to talk about this in your communities. Students have an important role to play in this, to make it happen. I mean, if you're a college student, you can spend your winter break organizing this effort to stop the Trump-Pence regime from taking the reins of power. And so you can also reach through your networks to other students, even if they aren't taking classes right now. And this is an effort that needs to go viral. And students can put their effort into making it go viral, spreading it everywhere through social media and in other ways. And the high schools are still in session, and they'll go back into session right after the holidays. So that's an arena where organizing to stop this regime can begin right now. Now look, the holidays are coming up, but this ain't gonna be a break in this effort. It's gotta be a time to get more people organized into it. Religious gatherings that take place during the holiday season need to be places where people hear about the need to act to stop this fascist regime and get organized into it. You having family gatherings during the holiday? Well, a topic of discussion has to be the need to stop this Trump-Pence regime and how to do it and getting people organized into it. And And then afterward, we got to come back together and take this no, which is the symbol of this effort, and the call for this effort to resist, to another level, getting it out everywhere and raising the money needed to make this happen. Then on New Year's Eve, people need to take to the streets everywhere, being a living manifesto of the mass determination that exists broadly in society to act to stop this fascist regime. Every Trump property anywhere in the country, and even anywhere in the world, needs to have a demonstration out in front of it saying no to fascism on New Year's Eve. And then that no symbol needs to be everywhere. At the demonstrations, posted up and spread online, put up on the walls, and maybe somebody will even come up with a creative way for it to prominently appear in Times Square on New Year's Eve. Then, as January opens, the call to refuse to accept a fascist America is going to appear as an ad in a major publication like the New York Times, many other places, in print, online, broadly sounding the alarm on the danger that this regime poses for the country and the world, and calling on people to join the effort to stop it. And then, beginning with January 3rd, we've got to lead people into the street in mass actions. Mass actions that call to mind the way that people responded after the system refused to indict the cops who murdered Mike Brown in Ferguson and Eric Garner in New York, with people taking to the streets day after day, staying in the streets, disrupting business as usual. These actions also have to bring to mind Occupy, with people in the streets day and night, standing together against injustice. We got to be doing this every day. We got to be growing as we do it, spreading the word, because we got to reach tens of millions, 100 million people with this. We got to have that many people knowing about it in order to get the millions of people in the streets that are going to be needed to do this. January 12 and 13, that's a day of school walkouts all across the country. College, that's right. That's got to be the day when, if you're in college, high school, even middle school, you stepping out on that day because you don't want your future to be having to endure being ruled by a fascist regime. Then we're up to the Martin Luther King holiday weekend. That's a weekend when people got to pour into DC on a whole other level in powerful actions aimed at stopping this regime. Not just going down and registering that you don't like it and go home, but going down there to act to stop it and staying in DC. Don't go back home at the end of the weekend. Stay in DC. Demonstrate all over the city. Disrupt the business as usual of that town all through that week. And as we do that, call on others to join us. To join us in acting and disrupting the business as usual to stop this fascist regime from taking power. And look, those of you either here in this room or on the live stream that can't get to DC, okay, well, you try to get there, but if you can't make it, act wherever you are. Be in the streets together with us, even if you're geographically separate from us, acting together to do the same thing, to stop this illegitimate regime from taking power. See, and all of these efforts taken together would be aimed at creating an unprecedented political crisis in society that could lead to the stopping of this illegitimate regime. Now, this ain't something that's going to be easy, but it is possible. I mean, I've been around a while. You can see that by that gray here. During my lifetime, presidents have been driven from office, including in this country. LBJ didn't just decide he didn't want to run again. It was the crisis and the chaos in society that forced that decision. But let's get more recent so that it's in everybody's memory. Let's go back a few years to Egypt. They had an illegitimate regime. millions of people took to the streets, Tahrir Square, and stayed in the streets until that regime was toppled. Because see, millions of people can come suddenly and seemingly out of nowhere when the dam bursts. And we got to burst that dam in acting to stop this regime. I'm going to read again that paragraph from the plan issued by RefuseFascism.org. Imagine if people in the tens of millions filled the streets, powerfully declaring that this regime is illegitimate and demanding that it not be allowed to rule. The whole political landscape would be dramatically transformed. Every faction within the established power structure would be forced to respond. And all this could well lead to a situation in which this fascist regime is actually prevented from ruling. This is not some idle dream, but something which could be made a reality if all those who hate what is represented by this fascist regime translate their outrage into firm determination and massive mobilization to create the conditions which make this possible. For this to happen, we all need to organize on another level. We need to become the organizers of organizers of organizers. We need to throw our all in on this for the next month and more. Because just think what it would have meant if people had been able to join together to stop Hitler before his regime got started. Think of the difference it would have made for humanity. Well, I'm not trying to minimize what Hitler did, but today we're facing a fascist regime that's determined to institute a fascist rule with a finger on the nuclear buttons, aiming to make America first. We can stop this if we fight hard, creatively, and with unity. And the future of humanity may depend upon our success. Thank you, sisters.
To get connected. I want to have Iris Vanderplume is going to come up and read a statement we received today from Gloria Steinem. It's a message. She's a longtime feminist leader and figure. She sent a message to us here tonight. Please welcome Iris to come and read for us.
Thank you. Our Constitution does not begin, I, the President. It begins, we, the people. The single positive result of the so-called election of Donald Trump, an unqualified, unstable, and authoritarian man who does not deserve to be invited to the White House, much less be its occupant, is that we know now the responsibility lies with us. I am heartened by all the street demonstrations that have been a constant in every city since the election, by the planned marches in Washington during the time of inauguration, and by the major demonstrations in every state capital on this day of the Electoral College. Now we know it's up to we, the people, and we will not allow one authoritarian to dictate to us. Thank you for being here tonight in support of that future to which we aspire, democracy. Gloria Steinem.
Okay, after this next speaker, we're going to have a video message, so I want to give you a warning to get it queued up. But before we do that, we want to bring up Andy ZEE. He is a co-initiator of this effort, and he's been putting his heart and soul and energy and creativity into this. He is a revolutionary, he's an artist, and he is the spokesperson for Revolution Books up in Harlem. Please join me in welcoming Andy ZEE.
So you see, we're getting organized, and we're getting organized a bit at the last minute. So let me find what I have here. So I want to say, no. 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 Tonight we're beginning a month of resistance. We're going to make this whole country feel the power of no. And we're gathered here today at Cooper Union, and people are watching around the country and around the world because tens of millions of people are in anguish about what this will mean for the future. We've heard quite a bit about that tonight, and you just heard from Carl Dix on the plan. Those of you here tonight, those who have signed the call, and those of us who have initiated this, are here, as Carl said, to organize the organizers of the organizers. Speaking of tens of millions of people getting out in the streets and staying in the streets cannot just be nice rhetoric. It cannot just be wishful thinking. People need to understand that you cannot wait out fascism. That the time to organize against it is before it starts. I thought Carl brought this home. People need to know that there is a way to act on this basic truth. And tonight, each of you has a solemn responsibility to be a part of mobilizing millions. So no, the Trump-Pence regime must not attain power. They must not have the authority to curtail and potentially even to eliminate the right to dissent. And no, we will not let these lying thugs drastically undermine what is actually true and the people's access to information through their bullying, intimidation, and outright suppression of journalism, science, and the art. And no, the full power of the U.S. state must not be wielded to enforce the midnight Twitter ravings of Donald Trump and the Twitter swarming of the fascist minions that he leads. No, we must not let Donald Trump use the bully pulpit of the presidency and the force of the state to give backing to the vigilantism of those who would be his stormtroopers, moving to suppress immigrants, blacks, Latinos, LGBT people, and anyone outside their fascist white power world. They are trying to bludgeon this into place, and they will do it fast. There is history to learn from, and history that must not be repeated. So no, tonight we will start organizing. You look around the room, and it's so wonderful that you all came out tonight on 3 days' notice. But you look around the room and you see hundreds of us and perhaps thousands watching on live stream. How are we going to make this grow to millions? How are we not going to allow the reins of state power to get into the clutches of this Trump-Pence regime? The conditions. Let me just say this. There's a lot of people saying we have to step up our struggle for justice. There's many people who have a vision of a better world. I just have to say to you tonight that if that's where you're coming from, you cannot imagine how much more difficult that's going to be under a fascist regime. We failed to do everything we could to stop it. Again, I'm going to say, we must not fail to do everything we can do in this month to stop them. And we means you, and we means all of us. Everyone who is listening, everyone here, must become organizers. You have to reach out and arouse people. You have to get into what it is that we are facing and reach into the hearts and the thinking of millions of people. 2 weeks ago, since Sarah and Carl and I initiated this plan, and we quickly got some other people on board. But I want to speak to you frankly that part of what inspired this is that we were making plans. We were doing things at Revolution Books, 65 Defiant Days, but we looked at everything we were doing and we said it wasn't up to what we are facing. It wasn't up to what all these diverse political forces are doing, and there's lots of people organizing, lots of important efforts. But if we stopped and thought about what this is really going to mean, we had to confront the fact that none of it was going to stop the fascism. In fact, some of it was even slated to take part after it was started. This is not sufficient. It's important, but it needs to be brought together in a way to stop this. And I want to thank the speakers who came out on such short notice and all of you who came out. And I want to say that that has to be the pace of things. This urgency is what needs to characterize every day from here to January 20th. No, as Carl said, these holidays must not be your normal holiday. These are not normal times. We must not allow anything to be normal because there is nothing normal about Donald Trump and the fascist regime he wants to bring to power. So yes, step one, as Carl said, is going to be to turn this Hanukkah, Christmas, and for those of you who have these contentious atheist family gatherings, into organizing sessions where you get out with your relatives and start doing things around this. You need to go talk to your religious leaders and your community leaders right now to get on board with this, to lead people out of the mosque, out of the synagogue, out of the church. Take to the streets. Stand in silence, make a lot of noise. Either one, all of it. That's what we need. These no signs, are they up on the wall? Yeah. You have them in your packet. These have to proliferate. They have to be everywhere. Organize vigils, organize marches, make it known so that millions can start seeing this sign. Every lamppost, every office, every coffee shop, everywhere, high schools, colleges. No, hold fundraisers. This is very important. There was big applause for when Carl said we should put an ad in the New York Times. That's tens of thousands of dollars, but it can't stop with the New York Times. We have to be in the internet, and that too is expensive. Think about what it's going to cost to conduct Occupy-type protests all across the country, and especially in Washington, D.C. So over the holidays, this is a time to raise really big money to make this possible. Stop and think about it. What if you do, and what if we don't? If you organize this, if you raise the money and spread this word among thousands and tens of thousands and ultimately hundreds of thousands of people, this can be done. Do not underestimate the power of no. I believe that this is a time when a two-letter word can express and give shape to the will of millions of people. And let the people who are anguishing right now about a Trump-Pence administration, let all those who are seething with anger and rage, who are starting to organize and think about life under a fascist regime, know that they are not alone and that there actually is a plan and a way to stop this. Let them see that no. Let them have that as an expression of their feelings that this regime is illegitimate and immoral, and be a part of enabling them to know that there is a way out of this to stop it before it starts. And yes, let those in power see and feel this no everywhere. Let it be the case that there's nowhere they can turn where this isn't coming up. Organize. There's no one but the people in this room and the people listening who can do this. We must become millions, and we must become millions in a matter of weeks. Protesting every day and every night, and fairly soon staying through the night. Not just for one day, not just for a week, but until this regime is unseated, or before it's prevented from being seated. This is a big task, but it's been done before, as Carl said, and it can be done again. We have tens of millions of people who feel like you do. We have to go wake them up to the reality that they face and the prospects for actually stopping this. Carl read this paragraph twice, so I won't read it again, but I do want to emphasize one sentence from it, that if we create this kind of societal political crisis, we can create a situation where the whole political landscape and structure would be forced to respond to this demand. And they have plenty of ways and plenty of reason to disqualify this regime. So when you leave here tonight, make a plan. If 5 of you get out with a big no sign at a key intersection, or at a shopping mall, or do it the day before and the day after Christmas, let that 5 become 50, and 50 become 500, and 500 become 5,000. We have to spread the word face to face, through the media, and through social media. So there are tables out in front. There's tables out in front where you can sign up for various committees as part of the national office of this. You can get involved in it on that level, or be organizing with the group you're a part of. You have in your packet this refusefascism.org sheet. Take it out now. Don't wait till you're getting ready to go home. Take it out now, and I won't be offended if you're writing while I'm speaking. But if I don't see you writing, I'm going to keep talking. Okay, so get going. Look, if you belong to an organization or a congregation, you're in school, you're on a campus before break, go in and fight for your group and your organization to take this up and to plan their actions and find the ways to be part of the millions who need to act. You know that tech workers have signed petitions, and government workers and health professionals have declared that they won't cooperate or collaborate with the orders of the Trump-Pence regime. This is an important part of the basis for how and why we're going to be able to stop this. But those people, and you need to go talk to them and say, this is good, but it's insufficient. Make that part of stopping the regime. Those people who are planning protests, let's get a string of protests. We have the plan that Carl laid out. New Year's Eve, key date, the next weekend, protests around different fault lines, different parts of this program. Then the week after is Martin Luther King Day. At that point, we need to start occupying and having massive demonstrations. They can be every day, and as I said, some people should stay overnight until that becomes millions and millions of people. We don't want to be living under this regime. There's a one no that we don't want. We don't want the no that's directed against the people, against us, directed against the people by this fascist regime. So we have this basic plan. Carl laid it out. I just want to emphasize these 3 points from it. 1, fill out this card now. You need to take this up. You need to go to your organizations, call into the national office. What we intend to do, just to be clear in this, is for the national office to be kind of a clearinghouse. We're not talking about organizing every protest. That wouldn't be possible. It's not even desirable. We have to have these key convergences where people bring the different demonstrations or different organizations. Everybody has some aspects of different programs, but the one thing, the one single unified thing we have to do is we want to prevent this regime from taking power on January 20th, and that's going to require tens of millions of people in the street. That's the one unifying thing, and then everybody can be a part, and what they're doing will contribute to that. We can't be fighting like this. We have to be coming together to make this demand now. Number 2, start organizing for New Year's Eve. The story on the 31st of December should be people are planning to do this giant no on New Year's Eve all over the country. We need to get busy with that now. I believe that in your packets, or maybe on the screen, there it is, Wednesday, 2 days from tonight in New York City at 6:30 at the Theater for a New City, which is just around the corner on, I think it's between 8th and 9th, or 9th and 10th on First Avenue. You need to put it back up there so people can find it. But you need to be there in New York, and people need to organize meetings in many different cities. 3rd, raise funds. As I said before, this has to get published on January 3rd, hopefully in the New York Times. That will take tens of thousands of dollars. And last, if you were a student and you were on winter break, change your plans. Volunteer. Form a committee. Join the national office. Volunteer, send in an application, go to refusefascism.org, and make history next month. If you are retired, there is nothing more important for you to do than be part of this for the next month. Nothing more important, nothing more meaningful than fighting now for the future. Many of you who are retired did this in the 1960s. You were right then, and you're needed now. And everyone else, which is most people, take a leave from work or turn your workplace into a site of resistance. Tonight this begins. It's a month of resistance. We will not accommodate, we will not conciliate with, and we will not collaborate with a fascist regime. Recognize the power of the no. Recognize what it would mean if this is all over. And that behind that no are millions of people in the street. And yes, it's going to start with tens and 20s and hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands. And so every time you talk to people, you have to insist that they talk to more people. And that's how we're going to do this. There's nothing more important. There's nothing of greater meaning that we could do. The future does actually depend upon it. So thank you, and sign up at the table.
Okay, we have a 1-minute video that we want to share with you. It's from Isabel Cardenas. She's a co-initiator of this effort. She is a leader in the immigrant rights community out in Los Angeles. She's organizes an annual Salvadorian festival in Los Angeles that draws tens of thousands of people. If we have the video queued up, we have a short message from her, and then immediately following that, and I'm going to do the introduction now so that we can speed this along.
I am telling everyone that we must say no. In the name of humanity, we cannot accept a fascist government in the United States.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here with you today. I wanted to begin with a small anecdote from far away. It was during the apartheid regime in South Africa, and there was a budgetary discrepancy, right? And there's an old saying that 67% of statistics are made up on the spot. So I don't know how many percentages his budget was over. And a question began in the apartheid regime. Why are we spending so much money on these scientific research projects? And what came to light was that they were retesting artifacts again and again because the scientists just couldn't rationalize and come to terms with the idea that the artifacts from the African people that were there in South Africa were older than the oldest artifacts that they could find from European, or using a very nice word, settler, European forcible immigrants that came there. And I think that this point illustrates what we're dealing with now, which is the evolution of a false narrative. And nowhere is this more dangerous in the upcoming fascist regime that we see within immigration. The false narrative that is pushed again and again and again. And that's what I'm here to talk with you about today. Unfortunately, what happens is that the evolution of a false narrative comes in when the original story isn't challenged, when it's not spoken about, and it's never had its due day in court, as we say. One thing that people forget about immigrants, and especially European immigrants when they started coming to this country, is that they just didn't apply for citizenship. People also applied for whiteness. And what was the purpose of this? Well, of course, it was because if you were not designated as white, you couldn't join unions, it says here. Police department was off limits to you. The fire department, you couldn't get a loan from a bank. You were redlined, districted into a certain place. So when we talk about people that begin and come to this country and invent a bootstrap mythology of, yes, I came here and I had a lot of problems, absolutely. No one will contest that Eastern European immigrants were treated horribly, that Irish people were treated terribly, that Italian people and Jewish people were looked down upon when they were immigrants to this country. But the reality is that we discover that many of these groups had advantages they don't even understand that they have. So much so that it becomes a question of not being able to contend with the idea that many of the people that we call quote-unquote immigrants to this country are actually indigenous people whose peoples have lived here for thousands of years. I think it's important because at a certain level, we used to make that statement. We were here for thousands of years before the creation of the United States of America, and we will be here. And that's where the saying stops. Because what if we're not here? What if the country and the other nations around us have adopted a system of polluting this planet so much to the point that it becomes unlivable? To the people that are entering this country, I always say to them, I give a small anecdote of my life. I didn't become a citizen until I was 17 years old. And what I always remember is that as I began processing my life and started taking changes, I was offered a teaching position, thanks to Carmen Perez and Harry Belafonte. And he said something to me during a conversation that he has said plenty of times, that when he spoke to Martin Luther King Jr. at a young age, that the Reverend confessed to him that he was unsure whether he was integrating his people into a burning home. And often I say that to the people that are immigrating here. We will help you with your status. We will continue that fight. Just the same way everyone here will leave re-energized, ready to go out there and stand for what's right. But my cautionary words to them are that you are now becoming a part of a nation that has only known 20 years of peace in its entire existence. Ever since it donned the cloak of republic, it has not had continual epics of non-violent affairs. We've been somewhere all the time. China, right? North Korea, Cambodia, Japan, Germany, all of Central America. Are we in a nation that has decided to stop war? Are we in a nation that doesn't continue to proliferate that? We welcome people into this country who are traditionally from here, and yet they are unfortunately the victims of the small writing when it comes to the American Republic. What does the future hold for these immigrants? Will they be demanded of to serve in the military to prove their loyalty to this country? What is it that truly makes a person in America? When they fall out of a hole somewhere and decide they're going to hate other people just because they happen to be in this country? What about the immigrant people who have served in the military, wars that I don't agree with, and yet deported just the same? When I speak to you about these issues, I don't speak to you as a liberal or a progressive. I speak to you as a revolutionary because I think I have a long-standing belief that this system was never designed for people like me. And for those of you that are confused, oh man, you found some modicum of success in this world. Yes, but when Pharaoh brought the Hebrew people into Egypt to be his slaves and build whatever it is that needed to be built, do you think that he brought them in with the promise of, hey, do you know what? One day, little stonecutter, one of you can grow up to be Pharaoh too. That was never part of the plan. Neither there nor here, ladies and gentlemen. We have to have an honest conversation about the history that this nation has endured, because without doing that, we continue perpetuating myths and lies. And without that being unchallenged by every single one of you, whether in these small conversations or in your college classes or at home, when we talk about this over the winter break, confronting fascism, confront the false history as well, ladies and gentlemen. Learn the ugly truth about the way the nation was actually founded. Realize that we're not just here because of a series of mistakes that we're reacting to, that now more than ever we need to be proactive in our response to this. And I'll describe the difference very simply before I leave. There's a water tower on top of most of the buildings in this city here in New York. If one of those water towers, God forbid, fell off and killed someone tonight, tomorrow there would be a study on water towers. You would see it all over the newspaper. People would say, oh, check if your water tower is safe. The water tower inspectors, there would be new people everywhere. The mayor would be on the news. But there's nothing about that tonight because it doesn't seem like some impending danger. Well, now the veil has been lifted and we see an impending danger, ladies and gentlemen. And we have no other choice but to organize. Now, I can appreciate the loving sentiments, the righteous indignation, and the fury